When a person's biggest risk is trying to get through the day without falling down, that's not a great life. And he said, this is the reality for most people the age of their residence, 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, right? They get so concerned about hurting themselves, which is valid, but they end up taking it too far. And they extract all risk from their lives. And they step back and they cocoon themselves, and the whole industry helps them to do that. They isolate themselves from the rest of the world. And to Stan, and I have to admit to you, I felt like such a freaking idiot because it was so obvious after he said this to me, and I just never thought of it this way before. He said, when you consider the wisdom, the collected wisdom that a person has from their life experience by the time, once they reach 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, he said, that's the time they should be stepping up, not back. That's when they have so much to offer the rest of us. That make sense? It did to me. It's like the lights went on. So here's what they do at Hallmark. They look for ways to inspire audacity in their own residents. They look for ways to help them get beyond the constraints they put on themselves. And they do this very deliberately by bringing in levels of challenge and risk and meaning. For example, some of it's kind of small, seemingly, small stuff with a big impact. It's become a tradition now at Hallmark that see if you can picture this in your mind's eye. It's become a tradition that every so often they'll sponsor for their residents electric scooter races. Yeah, and it's really cool because what happens is, I mean, if you can just picture these little old men, little old ladies, racing down the street on their scooters. He said what happens is they start saying to themselves, I can't believe I'm doing this. I didn't think I could do this anymore. I thought this part of my life was over. And they realize that it's not. And they realize that they can do it. So what do you think the next question they're going to start asking themselves is? What else can I do? He's breaking down those constraints, right? And they do all kinds of things, and it all leads up to the big one. It's become their mission, part of their mission at Hallmark. Every spring, this originally started just with Stan and the management team, but every spring they go down to a community in Guatemala to do service work. They go into this incredibly impoverished community, and they bring in, not only do they bring in, medical supplies and some docs that go with them to, give support and all that, but they also bring in hope, and they bring in friendship, and they bring in connection. And they work in the orphanage, and they work in the AIDS hospice, and they work with the old folks in the community, and it's just become this incredible relationship. And over the last couple of years, they've gotten their residents involved in that work too. Agnes was 91. 91. And this was a woman who had incredible passion and fire for human beings, and she, she wanted to go on this trip. They said, okay, come on along. So April of 2003, 91 years old, Agnes Goodman went with the team to Guatemala. She worked in the orphanage. She really connected with the kids, fell in love with them, and had this incredible experience. It was an inspiration to everybody. And then one day, one of the staff told me this story. She said they were taking a tour of a nearby macadamia farm, and Agnes was pretty tired. It was around lunchtime. They brought her a chair. And the staffer described the scene to me this way. She said she remembered watching Agnes sit down in this chair, and this normally very talkative, energetic woman went completely silent. It didn't say a word for several minutes, but she could tell from the look on her face that she was thinking very deeply and very seriously about something, till finally she lifted up her head and she looked around at the surroundings and she let out this big sigh and she said, we have so much to do here in Guatemala. As if overwhelmed by the task ahead. Now here's what that made me think. Isn't that a beautiful picture? If I'm lucky enough to make it to 91 years old, and I'm still thinking about how much more there is for me to do to help change some piece of the world for the better, that will have been a great life. And for Agnes Goodman, towards the end of her days, she was given that opportunity to have that bold and blatant disregard for normal constraints in order to change the world for the better, and she finished her days in a deeply meaningful and significant way. And this was towards the end of her days. 6 months after they returned to Vancouver, Agnes passed away. But she left this amazing legacy there. They still talk about her. Here it is, it's 6 years later. They still talk about her as an example of what's possible. Now, I share this story with you for a specific reason. Not just because I think it's inspiring, which frankly is good enough reason to share it with you, but because it's a beautiful textbook example of audacity. And here's the punchline. In a business context, right? I mean, if you want to get really clinical about this, what I just shared with you here is a business case. This is their business. Don and Agnes and people like them, the other residents, are their customers, right? And remember what their objective is. It's to change the world of their industry. So they figure it this way. We've got to prove to everybody else that there's a better way to do things. And the way that we got to do that, first of all, it starts by inspiring audacity in our own residents. There's a whole part of the story I haven't even touched on, which is the audacity they had to inspire in their staff to get them to care for and relate to their residents in an entirely different way. And on it goes. Now, you may or may not be in a business that relates to senior care, so let's bring this back home to whatever aspect of the world you're involved in. How are we going to change the world of our employees, of our customers, of our marketplace? You define the scope of world, and then I'm suggesting that this question demands its place at the strategy table, along with all the other important business questions that we ask ourselves every day about increasing market share and improving margins and all that other good stuff. This gives context to it, and it lays out very clearly what our charge is.